So I wanted to talk a little bit about art supplies. When starting a new class, it can be overwhelming to look at the art supply list and think, I need to purchase everything on this list. My intention for providing the supply list is so that you can see everything that I'm using throughout class. That being said, everything can be replaced with different brands, different mediums, even if you prefer. I would much rather you work from what you have on hand than go out and feel like you need to spend a lot of money on new supplies. Also, that being said, if there is one supply that really sticks out to you that you'd like to add to your practice, and then go, by all means, treat yourself and go get it. I also want to note that I have been doing art for a long time. So I've been collecting my supplies for a very long time as well. I didn't purchase it all at once. Specifically, I get asked a lot about these Charbon paints. I know that they're more expensive. You do not need to use the Charbon paints. We can absolutely work from certain other brands. I like Liquitex, I like Goldens, but you can even work with craft paints as well. So through this lesson, it's going to be specific to Seascapes of Maine. So we're going to be trying to recreate basically my Charbon colors from about 6 colors that you can use, from Goldens, Liquitex, or again, craft paints. But I wanted to show you that you can basically recreate any color with a very, very limited amount of supplies. So I thought this would be helpful not only for the Seascapes of Maine students, but for all of my students. So I really hope that you can kind of connect to this, and we'll talk a little bit more about acrylics specifically, because that's what we're working on throughout this class. We're gonna work on blending, mixing, creating gradients, so that you can get a lot of different colors just through limited supplies. First, we're going to talk specifically about the supplies used in our Seascapes of Maine course. So I want to use my Delusions art journals. You see me use these in a lot of my classes. I absolutely love them. I don't switch very often just because they come in a variety of sizes. They're really thick pieces of paper. I kind of like that they're a little creamier, not stark white. They have this little pocket in the front that you can collect memorabilia when you're traveling, and they come in a variety of sizes. So we'll do some sketches, and then I have a little clip here that holds the papers down. And in the sketching, we're just going to be working in colored pencils, and then Stabilo is a water-soluble pencil as well, but just in a blue or, a burnt sienna or a brown color. And then I have just an eraser, and then we'll go a little bit more into our painting. So this is kind of the palette I use throughout course. You can see that a lot of these come straight from the Charbon colors, but you can absolutely recreate them. So the Charbon colors used are Davies Gray, Flesh Ochre, Brown Madder, Sky Gray, Alexander Blue, Green of Nice, Naples Yellow, Ash Blue, Yellow Ochre, and Caribbean Pink. And then onto the side, I have my Goldens colors. I have a green gold. It's either a Jenkins green or a dark green, Payne's gray, and a Titan buff. And I pulled these because these colors, really to me mimicked some of the ideas and the feelings I got from Maine, and specifically from the Seascapes. Now I'm going to show you that these colors over here can basically recreate all of the colors. So, your green and yellow can be mixed to make your green gold. You have this flesh ochre color that can be mixed with red and yellow and white to get that flesh ochre color. And, your blue, you can mix it with a black in order to get kind of that Payne's gray color as well. So we'll kind of walk through that, but you can recreate pretty much any of these colors. There's maybe one or two other colors that I find really tricky, maybe to recreate. That would be kind of your green of Nice is a little tricky in Alexandra blue, but I do get fairly close. So it gives you an idea too, if there's some like a really unique color that's hard for you to mix, maybe that's where you spend the money and buy the Charvin color. But your Titan Buff, your pale yellow, you can absolutely recreate those as well. Other items I'll be using is a variety of paintbrushes, some shaper tools or palette knives. But when you look at my paintbrushes, I use both square and round brushes for different techniques throughout the class. And then you're going to want a palette as well. Throughout this class, I'm going to just be working in acrylics. I love them because they're quick drying, they're water soluble, and you'll see me use more expressionism, which is really just an objective reality rather than on subjective emotions or responses. So I'm going on my memory. So I want it to be a little bit more based on my emotions and of my memory rather than really representational or really realistic. But I'm getting kind of those dry, I'm using the wet on wet medium to get some of that really nice expressionistic technique. Now let's move into mixing these colors. So I'm going to have 6 colors. I'm going to have my cadmium red medium, my cadmium yellow medium, and then I'm going to be working with like a phthalo green, and then the blue color, you can either work with a phthalo blue, which I will initially, but I'm also going to show you what a cobalt blue looks like and what an ultramarine blue looks like, so you can see the variety there. So just pick one of the blues, and then I'm going to be using black and white. You could go to your local art store and buy these separately, or sometimes they do sell them in a set. From these colors, you could pretty much mix anything. And this goes beyond our Seascapes class. You could do portraits from this. You could do florals, anything that you want. But I want to just start here showing you that I'm mixing this red and this yellow and a little bit of white. I'm starting to create kind of these nudish colors that I have here. One is a little bit more of a pinkish color, and then recreating kind of that flesh ochre that's the Charvin color. By adding just a little bit more pink to it, I'm going to create more of a pinkish color versus adding a little bit more yellow, and I'm going to get a little bit more of that flesh ochre color. So I am just mixing this right on my palette. Now you could do this in your journal so that you have it for reference to go back to as well. But I'm going to make just kind of a mess of it. I'm not going to be cleaning my brushes much in between, just to show you the variety of colors that we can get just by adding just a little bit more yellow, or adding a little bit more red, or adding a little bit more white. We're going to get quite a variety of colors just from this. Then I'm going to take my green and my yellow. This is a bright green, so you could explore different greens as well. But I'm going to start here because I want to get that kind of bright neon color that I have, and then kind of add some different colors to tone it down or neutralize the color. So again, using my cadmium yellow and mixing that either with a phthalo green or your like a permanent green light, or you can pick another green that you like as well. But right now I'm just mixing it so you can see that I get kind of that limeish green, and then the more dark I add, or a little bit of blue I add here, I'm going to start getting just a little bit darker, more muted green, which is kind of mimicking some of the colors here on the left from my palette. From my Charvin colors. Then I'm bringing in some white so you can see that I get kind of those sagey greens here. I have my neon green already, and then coming in with the complementary color. If I add too much red, it's going to create a brown, but if I add a little bit of red, then it's going to create this really nice kind of neutral color. So it's not near as bright as my original green, which here was a permanent green light. So mixing in complementary colors. complementary colors are opposite each other on the color wheel. And so if you have green, you're gonna mix red in there to kind of tone down the color. If you orange and blue, for instance, yellow and purple, and then if you want to get a brown, you got to do like equal parts, and you're going to get a very nice brown color. But if you don't want the brown, just add about like 70% to 30% of the color. Now I'm bringing in a little red and blue to that same green to see that I can get an even darker kind of greenish blue color. And then I'm going to put a little bit of white there and a little bit more green so that you can see another shade as well. But I'm just mixing again right here on this palette. But if you wanted to, you could do this in your journal so that you have it for reference. Just make sure that you write down the colors so that you can remember how you mixed your colors. But this is absolutely the best way to experiment and learn a little bit more about color and mixing. So coming in now, I have some paint on my brush, a little bit more muted. I came in with the green and I'm trying to recreate this green of Nice. Now this one is a unique one. I can get fairly close to it with this kind of darker color that I've created and then bringing in the green. But it's not exact. So if that's something you might want to splurge on, some of these colors that you find as you're mixing that maybe you can't get quite as close to. Now I have a lot of kind of neutral grays as well. So I'm mixing my complementary color to kind of get that kind of brownish, grayish color and then coming in with my whites and it has just a little bit of a warmer tone to it. I would say kind of like a grayish color. And then you can see here I can get all the shades that are going down the middle of my left palette just by adding a variety, by adding more and more white. I very rarely mix with black. I have it on the page, but I usually use my complementary colors instead of using black in order to kind of create darker versions of the colors. So, you just keep playing. You can see I could get so many colors in different shades just from these colors. So now that we have a fair amount of our greens and our nude colors, at least a way for you to start, we're going to go into our blues. This is a bright blue, and this is our phthalo blue that I started with. And I would say it says it has like a red shade to it, but it can be very, very bright. So in order to kind of tone down that brightness, I'm going to try to mix in a little bit of orange. So I'm just taking the red and yellow and mixing it directly here because orange is opposite the color wheel. And you can see it starts to create a little bit of a brown color. So I'm going to mix in a little bit more of the blue to really kind of tone this down a little bit. I want more of a muted color because throughout this class, my palette was more of a muted color. Now, if you want to keep it brighter, don't mix as much of the orange into the blue. But for me personally, I wanted these nice kind of subtle muted colors throughout this class. And then once you mix in the white, you can see kind of where it's going. It actually has a hair of a kind of a turquoise to it. So a little bit more green than maybe I'm seeing here on the left. So I can experiment too with the other blues and just kind of play with them so that you can see just the varieties that we can get from 3 different blues, and we'll go into that next. But, as I'm here, as I have the paint on the page, I'm adding the white to kind of see these different colors I can create just from this blue alone. The darkest value I use through class is a Payne's Gray. So I will use my black now and mix it right here with the blue to create this dark Payne's Gray color. Payne's Gray almost looks black, but it's a really nice neutral blue that, provides really nice. And then when mixed with white, really comes close to some of those Charvin blue colors that I use throughout class. And I have kind of just like a little cloth that I'm wiping the brush down, but I am not being anal about washing all my brushes. So there is some hints of colors that are coming into my my paints and to my swatches just based on the fact that I'm not cleaning every time. I just didn't want to spend a ton of time cleaning all my brushes each time. But if you wanted to, like, clean them and then start recreating them, but it really isn't that big of a deal to get some other colors in there as well. But you can see here I've got that kind of gray blue color coming by adding white to my black and blue. Being that the blues are very important, I'm going to show you these 3 different blue variations. And the reason they're important in this class is because I'm working on seascapes. So not only is it shown in my, in the water and the ocean, but also in the skies. So here I have a cobalt blue, and to the left and to the right is my ultramarine blue. So my ultramarine, I'd say, has a little bit more of like a purplish tint, where, my cobalt blue, once I mix it, you can see the different shades. And then I'll put to the right again this phthalo blue that has kind of that red shade, so that you can see just the variations of blues that you can use, and then all the variations that you can get by mixing these blues with different colors. I actually think that my middle color here, which is just the blue mixed, which is the phthalo blue mixed with white, got very close to my Charvin Alexander's blue. So I'd be pretty satisfied with using that in place. If you wanted to get even closer, it almost has a little bit more of a hair of purple in it. But I would say that's a really close color that you could go ahead and use it. So I'm taking that cobalt blue and white mixture and adding a teeny bit of black here to show you, what does that kind of look like by muting it down with a black versus muting it down with like an orange. And, I usually, it turns out fine. But again, I always lean towards using the complementary color to mute it down versus black. But as you're starting, just play with it and experiment. This is all about experimenting and allowing yourself to really play and come up with these different colors. And then, again, just make a lot of notes so that you remember what colors you used in case you want to recreate that in a different painting down the road. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more of that red, that cadmium red medium and cadmium yellow medium here to create an orange color. And then we can add that here to our complementary color, to our blue, so that you can see the difference of it right here versus adding black versus adding the complementary color. So if I add too much, you can see it turns kind of brown or greenish, but when I add a little bit more blue, so I'd say about 70% blue and then 30% of your complementary color or your green, then I'm going to get an entirely different shade. So I think it's just a really important, especially if you're just starting out, to really try to experiment and play around. So I'm going to try, I got close to the green of Nice, I got close to that Alexander's blue, which are the most unique. And now I'm going to just kind of bring in, I have a Naples yellow, so I'm going to just kind of start creating some of those yellow colors as well that I used. I kind of have a warmer yellow, which is more of a yellow ochre, and that was a little tough to recreate, but you certainly can by adding a little bit of red. And then your Naples yellow is really just kind of a soft yellow. So adding just a hair of the yellow to your white. Now your cadmium yellow medium is very, very bright. So you might, again, want to tone it down or neutralize it by adding a hair of the complementary color. I never want my students to feel overwhelmed that they have to purchase all the supplies. I really want you to be able to feel like you can create and feel like you can use the same kind of colors no matter what you have. And I hope in this video is that it shows you that you really can just buy very few supplies, or maybe spend a little bit more money on these 6 colors using maybe a Goldens or a Liquitex, and then, you know, splurge down the road, but, you know, just spend the money on just these 6 colors, or really your 4 colors, because black and white, you don't have to spend much on. And, you know, then you really can get very close to so many of these Charvin colors. I've spent a lot of time collecting paint, but this is what I do for a living. If this for you is more of a hobby or a craft, then that's fine. You don't have to go out and spend money on the most expensive paints. But this for me is a profession. So I do want to spend a little bit more on my supplies here and there. And it took me a long time to build up my collection of paints. So you can see I'm getting different colors of yellow here. You could experiment, you know, just by mixing all different kinds here. You could add some red. You get kind of a brownish color, which is close to this middle color here on the left palette. So I'm fairly close. And then by adding a little bit more of the yellow, I'm just getting even another value. I hope this lesson helped you to get started and to learn how to do some mixing. And I can't wait to see what you create and what palette you come up with. You never have to follow along with my palette, but if it helps you to follow along, then by all means use similar colors. But you can absolutely recreate your own palette. Sometimes as you're mixing, you come up with a color that you just absolutely love, and you want to add that into your practice. So I hope this helps you as you're painting, whether it be oils or acrylics. So thank you so much, and let's get started on our lessons.